Hello lovelies, Jammo here, coming to you from a rainy California day in the midst of some depressive clouds to talk about The Iron Claw, a new-ish movie about a family of wrestlers and the brutal trajectory of their lives. There are two reasons I wanted to watch this film. The first is the subject matter. I love movies about fighting or fighters no matter the tone. That could be feel-good classical movies like Rocky, all the way down to the bottom end of the tonal spectrum with sad films like The Wrestler, and everything in between. I don't watch many combat sports in real life, whether that's UFC or WrestleMania, but I do find it very compelling when presented cinematically. And I think that's because it's just such a goldmine for storytelling. Whether you're inventing the character or basing it off real life like the Iron Claw, it takes a certain type of human to engage in physical combat for a living, and there's a story there, often some tragedy as well. I don't know, it's just very fertile grounds for a compelling narrative. Anyway, the second reason is that this was released by A24. And being the good pretentious movie boy that I am, I tend to really like their films. They're almost always classy, restrained, and a refreshing counterbalance to the mainstream. It's sort of like the hipster indie rock of the cinema world, if you will. So of course, when I saw A24 was releasing a film about wrestling, I knew I had to watch it, despite being completely unfamiliar with its director and having no interest in the star, Zac Efron. Believe it or not, I've never actually seen him in anything before now. Kind of impressive actually, because he's been around. I think I wrote him off as just one of those irritatingly handsome romantic comedy guys, but looking through his IMDb, I do see he has some interesting films under his belt, and he was great in this, so maybe I do need to change my tune. Let me know if he is in anything you think is particularly great, and I'll add it to my list. But I've waffled for far too long. Welcome to my channel, by the way. Let's talk about the film. The Iron Claw is based on / inspired by the true story of the Von Erich family, who are considered royalty in the pro wrestling world. The film takes place in the 70s and 80s and follows the four Von Erich brothers as they follow in their domineering father's footsteps into the world of suplexes, pile drivers, and talking smack to jabronis on the mic. So it's basically a movie about family, right? It's a wrestling family, and boy, you better do good wrestling or dad won't love you. And mom will just keep quiet and pray to the Jesus. You know, that sort of family. And let me just dispel any illusions you might have about the film being something like the aforementioned Rocky, because it is not that. It is a trail of pain, misery, and death. And while the film does ultimately end on a nice bittersweet note, the path to get there is paved in tragedy so thick it would make a Greek playwright wet with envy. So first off, I really enjoyed the look and feel of this movie. One thing it does very well is set and setting. Everything from the haircuts and costumes to the furniture itself just screams 1970s. It's so authentic you can almost smell it, and my mind was filling in the blanks with the imaginary waft of cheap cigarettes and unwashed sweat. And to that point, I think the film's greatest attribute in general is how lived in it feels. It's very naturalistic, and the tone is very anti-schmaltz, anti-Hollywood. There's no triumphant movie moment where the music swells as Rocky screams, "Adrian!" In fact, just to give you an idea of the restraint here, that moment does happen. One of the brothers does win the world title, which is what the family has been dreaming about. In another movie, that would be the point of the movie. But for Iron Claw, the director made the choice for this scene to happen over a fuzzy radio while the camera lingers on the family's empty backyard. It's actually my favorite shot in the film because it shows that this story is not really about championships. It's about the presence and ultimately the absence of brotherhood, symbolically presented with an empty shot of home. I know, I sound all pedantic, but just watch the movie and you'll see what I mean. There are numerous choices like this, where the big moments are placed in the background. This might frustrate people looking for a popcorn movie, so don't come here once again looking for that. It's way less grand and way more depressing than your typical Oscar drama. This is not Cinderella Man. I also really like the performances. None of them stand out in a way that screams, "Give me an Academy Award," but to the point about the film feeling natural. the most beautiful moments are almost always incidental, like the way one brother will look at another, and these little echoes of unspoken love that come from minor gestures. It's a bit too far to say the film reminds me of Terrence Malick, but it does approach that. There's a little bit of Tree of Life in here, and since I watched the movie a few days ago, it's these little moments that have stuck with me. I still also feel like I can taste this movie. Is that weird? It tastes like sweaty old leather. I don't know, man. Maybe my synesthesia is just acting up again. Ultimately, The Iron Claw is a very good movie that might not play like you think it will unless you're familiar with A24. If you know A24, then it makes complete sense, but for a movie about combat and championships, it's only tangentially related to those things. There's not a whole hell of a lot of fighting at all, actually. Instead, it's about the complexion of a very specific family in a very specific period of time, as well as the inner workings of a very tough, dehumanizing industry. And you get to experience the love and the pain and the loss, all wrapped up within an immersive and ultimately restrained production. And that's The Iron Claw. I recommend it to pretty much anyone if it sounds good. It's not for everybody, but if you did see it, let me know what you thought. As always, if you liked the video, you can help by sharing it with your friends or pressing the like button. Anything's great. And by subscribing if you'd like to join me on my cinematic adventures. That's all for today. I bid thee adieu from rainy California. Be well out there, and I'll see you in the next one.